Well, a friend suggested a Sadhguru video, and most interesting why, the significance of God being worshipped in the feminine. In, I think he said, every village in India has its, or every temple has, every town has its female temple of some sort, Kali or someone or other. And interesting view, of course, in ancient India that the female is inward-looking and the male is outward-looking. The male, in Sadhguru's view, is ready to travel the world, and the woman is ready to settle down where she is, if she can. I mean, assuming it's tolerable to make a home. And that fortunately most men have a great need for women, and therefore we get some happy compromise. Her ability to settle and his ability to find the right place, I suppose. Yeah. An interesting aside he made is that since rationality developed, and he goes on in some argument development, but in some sense that rationality implication has its problems, and there are other ways of that wisdom is not. I think what we're getting at is wisdom is not simply a case of rationality. Wisdom is much more practical. Do this and avoid doing so and so. How to handle, for instance, uncertainty. There is no rational way of dealing with uncertainty. If you have incomplete information, you simply cannot make a reliable decision. There is still uncertainty. You can hope to assess probabilities and get on average a better outcome, perhaps, avoid certain dangers. But it's still very dodgy, very imperfect. And wisdom, on the other hand, compared to straight rationality, somehow finds those rules, if you like, principles that tend to be safer living than others. And so it's, wise perhaps to look before you leap. On the other hand, there's some concern rationally that spend too long being wise and you've lost the opportunity of leaping. And you're dead, Your reactions sometimes are a bigger safeguard. But it's an interesting view, isn't it, that from a quite different culture, that rationality is not to be the God that it is of the academic world. I don't mean academics are wonderfully rational, but they do praise rationality and despise religion because it seeks a wisdom that doesn't measure up to the criteria for rationality. But the followers of such religion claim, of course, that yes, but it is expedient, it works. What's my view, majorly spiritually speaking, that the Jesus story, the God being your heavenly dad, is, if you live according to such a belief, a trust rather, your life is so immeasurably improved compared to not believing in God at all that no amount of rational argument is going to take you away from your chosen path of trusting that God is your heavenly dad. And I've spent 10,000 recordings praising this view and developing it, so to speak. And you could say that possibly through the influence of Paramahansa, highly likely, it's because of this Eastern understanding of wisdom, which is, and religious understanding generally, of course. I mean, you know, what's become Western religion, which was at least Middle Eastern, wasn't it? And, you know, Hebrewism or Christianity, whatever that turned out to be once mangled by the Romans, was still a notion of faith and belief. And therefore comes the importance of the guru and the teacher, because it's not something you can do on your own with some rationality kit. They're not claiming, of course, that religion is irrational, but they are saying the importance of a teacher or a priest, you know, an enlightened person, a saint who can teach you, and in some sense, therefore, you're subservient to, you're deferring to the wise. And that if you don't defer to the wise, which in fairness most cultures and civilizations have done through history, have praised a deference to the wise, the elders of the community. If you don't do that, then the fear is that society will collapse. And indeed, of course, we do have in the modern world this notion that our modern society could collapse any minute. You know, there's always rumours of wars and collapse going on. Well, there always was rumours of wars, but we seem to be able to destroy ourselves on a spectacular scale now, whether it's through genetic engineering or well, all the conspiracy stuff, you know, I mean, evil people running the planet and so on and so forth. Okay. Why am I recording this? Well, partly because my friend sent me what I take to be an interesting enlightenment Sadhguru holding forth. I don't know if there's many Sadhgurus. Anyway, this particular chap with long white hair and long white beard and dressed like an Eastern sage, and I don't want to be unkind, but pontificating really in reply to 3 young people who could question him. Yeah, it's an interesting sort of interesting opening onto something quite fundamental in difference in culture, handling, for instance, a question like, is it creation myth or is it Darwin, evolution myth? He didn't say myth for Darwin, but most scientific theories have so many flaws, I would say, you know, doubts, problems, that they have to be revised, and sometimes they're swept away by the next theory that comes along that seems to be more adequate in explaining phenomena that we see. I found it interesting that you could go backwards to worshipping sort of, you know, the Buddhist thing where you go back through, in his view, Sadhguru's view, or you go forward in the line of, well, I guess what he would say, wisdom, which is the path he's chosen. And was at pains to point out that the history of his particular religious practice goes back at least 15,000 years, and that the consequent yoga practices and so on would help a development that apparently won't help you physically, but will help you consciously to develop. Apparently, in his view, the physical world, astronomy, local astronomy in particular, the sun, the moon, and so on, and the earth, predetermine the limits of current physical development, whereas yoga practices could consciously help you to develop way beyond. So you can develop in either direction, in his view. Well, I thought that's rather interesting. It's a bit of a downer. I think psychologically we do think going backwards into history might be inferior, but though he was claiming it's not, and therefore the Buddhist line of sort of getting rid of everything, consciousness in the mind really, being in utter peace is as good a way to go as going forward in the path that he's chosen. Not quite as good, presumably, because he's chosen his path and not the Buddhist one, but interesting view. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. Oh yes, and that reminds me, thank goodness, it doesn't have my particular obsession, you could say, with God being understood as your Heavenly Dad, as in the Jesus story, narrowly the Jesus story, not the Christian religion particularly. So I think I'm looking at another religion, another view in Sadhguru, and it's helpful in some ways, as indeed I think almost every major world religion is helpful in some ways. And I can see it has its downside as well. But I expect I'll become clearer on that the more I listen to someone like Sadhguru. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. Wow. What's the end game was another question put to him in the next video of Sadhguru. I'm reminded that sad, whatever it means in Indian culture, translates very simply from the sound in Western culture as sad. And Guru, oh my goodness, from my point of view, that's not the Jesus story. So I then look for the obvious, which I've already pointed out, of course, that he's not taking the view that God is your Heavenly Dad, and presumably, if anything, he's seeing God as Divine Mother. And perhaps not even that, perhaps it's but whatever. Okay, so what does marshalling hope? Well, it's a certain optimism in the word hope, and a certain ordering and in the word marshal. Actually, marshal meant keeper of horses, I believe, originally. And my granddad was, on mum's side, was a keeper of horses. Stable boy at 8 when he left school. Became the Empress's coachman. Yes. What does the horse do? Gives you a freedom of transport. A staggering having a horse instead of a car, you know. It was pointed out to me, someone who said they had a horse and a caravan pulled, a light caravan presumably. The fuel is for free. He just eats the grass on the way. And don't work him too hard. If he can do 20 miles in a day, just do 10. And he'll probably last forever and quite happily with you. And he'll roam the world with you. If roaming the world is what you need to do, of course. Interesting. Anyway, coming back to what's the end game? Was the question of this young man. And Sadhguru's answer I found was fascinating. It was that we're all limited by death and time in the physical, and he doesn't mention, well, not so far in the few recordings I've heard, anything much of God or even the astral and so on. But in the confines of looking at the physical, I think he was preoccupied with saying that we have limited time, and therefore it's a case of what we can do best in that time, in some sense. And if we heighten our faculties, especially our consciousness, then that seems to be doing best. In other words, in the physical, you'd like to be able to see better, hear better, taste, smell, touch more effectively, whatever. And other faculties we might have, rationality, decision-making, and so on. He didn't particularly mention those, but, well, of course he wouldn't. He's more into wisdom, but, yes. We have it in the Hebrew view of things that Solomon was wise in that he asked for wisdom. And that was a wise thing to do, apparently, because it's a circular argument. It presupposes that wisdom was the yardstick by which to measure whether he was wise, and that wisdom was of value. And I think we do think that is the case, although we might not particularly respect elders very much in our modern culture. As I pointed out just now, we have traditionally in most cultures, haven't we, if not all. It may well be that it's the combination of both logic, reasoning, and wisdom, seeking out authority and considering what it says is the way forward, that both faculties, if you like, are incredibly valuable to us. Could I say then that rationality has a certain wisdom about it, but not complete, and wisdom has a certain rationality about it, but not complete? That in fact completeness is a bit like the notion of perfection. It's perhaps open-ended, that perfection is like, I think, our view of perfection in the modern Western world, which is something finite but ever moving further than we are now. We can think of ways of improving and so forth. But there's something eternal about perfection. Well, I nearly said infection, didn't I? Something eternal about infection too. It seems to multiply. We find a way of coping with it rather than a way of destroying it. If you try to destroy it, you may destroy all life with it, which is the problem of our modern weed killers and so on. It's very good at killing things, but maybe killing us as well. Coming back to practical diet and so on. Industrial farming could be the death of us, among other fears and problems, of course. No, it's not whether it's wisdom or rationality that's the problem. It's whether you have something to trust beyond you or not is the problem. We are brought up in a parental situation, or typically we don't survive, even if the ones guarding and protecting us weren't our genetic parents. We need that sort of external example somehow, not just in what to follow, but in fashioning our ability to hope. There's a sort of goal beyond ourselves now, which can and hopefully will be achieved. And that is something that's, I suppose, inevitably an experience of life, else you'd be dead. And therefore, our spiritual life, so to speak, is likely to be of that. So if you're not aware of the parent figure, that which is beyond the possibly attainable or the possibly attained by some, and those that have been, and that which has been the cause of our survival in existence, if we're not conscious of that, we may be greatly damaging living. And that may well be why belief in God, ideally your God, of course, I think, but a God is so necessary for your well-being, and why when you have it, to lose it is, well, it may be very freeing for some people if they've been constrained to follow a God they didn't love, that didn't reflect their own values. But it's unbelievably unsettling, because suddenly you're at a loose end without, well, it's as if you lose hope. You may now try to hope in yourself, but that is particularly difficult because our self experiences gains and losses, ups and downs, and fears and so forth as well. Whereas we need an anchoring, I think, to the external. You may say, what, fictitious? Perhaps, but taste and see. Does it make your life much better? Does believing that God exists and that He is an all-powerful God that loves you greatly encourage you and help you along life's road, and that to lose such is devastating? And if that is your understanding or experience, well, you'll know the way forward. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.